Anyone who has visited the United States may have noticed a large number of people without a permanent roof over their heads visible on the streets of cities. They do not hide in back alleys. They often pitch tents by city halls or set up encampments on beaches, within sight of tourists and the police. No one knows the exact scale of the phenomenon, but even conservative estimates speak of over 3 million people living outside formal shelter. In several metropolises, the problem has reached epidemic proportions, and it particularly affects Los Angeles, New York, Chicago, and San Francisco. Statistical data indicate that roughly 1 in 200 Americans has experienced a lack of a permanent place of residence at some point in their life. About 30% of the homeless are children and youth, which has dramatic consequences for education and the prospects of future generations. Nearly 40% of people deprived of a roof over their heads are women and girls, often fleeing violence or lacking means of livelihood. Around 38% of the homeless have an officially recognized disability, which significantly hinders finding work and access to medical care. All these statistics, however, are based on data from shelters and organizations, so the real picture may be significantly worse. The fastest growing category is single mothers with children, who cannot cope on a single income and with high living costs. Officials usually point to three main causes: the lack of affordable housing, poverty, and unemployment, but the list of reasons is much longer. One of the key policy mistakes was the elimination of funding for psychiatric hospitals from the 1950s, which directed many of the mentally ill onto the streets. Among the homeless, there is also a significant proportion of veterans, because the Department of Veterans Affairs does not always provide sufficient social housing and care. The costs of maintaining even a budget apartment consume a large portion of income, and with only one working family member, the risk of eviction rises sharply. Processes of redeveloping poor neighborhoods into parks and investments lead to rising rents and the displacement of tenants from the housing market. On the streets, we encounter orphans, youth rejected by their families, LGBT people, former prisoners, addicts, and victims of natural disasters. Authorities are not indifferent, because homelessness generates high costs for the budget, emergency services, and the healthcare system, so there is pressure to act. In the year 2013 in the state of Florida, it was estimated that the annual cost associated with one homeless person amounts to approximately $31,000. When that sum is multiplied by at least 3 million people, we get a staggering picture of the scale of public expenditures. These expenditures include police interventions, stays in detention, hospitalizations, the maintenance of shelters, and the activities of food banks. Until a comprehensive policy is created, charities and churches provide tangible support in the form of lodging and meals. There are also groups representing the homeless that lobby government offices and try to introduce changes from the perspective of people without a roof over their heads. As the problem grows, the attitude of the wealthy toward the homeless cools. Compassion gives way to fear, and solidarity is increasingly lacking. Young homeless people have limited access to education and work, which increases the risk of petty crime and the spread of infectious diseases. Among the homeless, there are people with severe mental disorders whose behaviors can pose a real danger to others. In the last 20 years, incidents of violence against the homeless have intensified. Attacks, beatings, and hate murders have become more frequent. A brutal example is the incident from the year 2014 when in Albuquerque 3 people killed 2 homeless individuals using bricks and metal bars. Seattle is sometimes called the homelessness capital of the country because of large encampments and a high number of people living in cars and tents. San Francisco, despite the proximity of the ocean and the wealth of some neighborhoods, still struggles with visible concentrations of people without a roof over their heads. Authorities planned the construction of affordable housing, but the implementation of such projects is blocked by enormous costs and complex administrative procedures. Proposals for laws on comprehensive psychiatric and therapeutic care for the homeless have been put forward, but many of them were never signed or implemented. Natural disasters and economic crises regularly increase waves of people losing their homes, because insurance and assistance often prove insufficient. Long-term unemployment and the lack of job opportunities for people with a criminal history block the return to a stable life and stable housing. Employers often refuse to hire former prisoners and people after addiction treatment, which prolongs the cycle of exclusion and poverty. Underfunding of psychiatric care and addiction treatment programs means that many in need never receive effective support. The visibility of homelessness degrades the image of cities and channels funds to the police instead of to long-term reintegration programs. Solutions must be comprehensive and combine housing, health care, employment programs, and legal assistance for the socially excluded.